Welcome to Big Blend Radio with your hosts, Lisa and Nancy, editors of BigBlendMagazine.com.
Well, on today's Big Blend Radio show, we're talking with Steve Piacente. He is the award-winning author of the novels Bella and Bootlicker, and he is joining us to talk about his third and riveting new novel, Pretender. It does keep you up at night because you want to know what's going on the next page. It's like, keep going, and all of a sudden it's 1 a.m, and you're like, dude, it's so cool. You got to read it. So, Kurt, I'm in the middle of it. This is Lisa. Nancy's read it, and she told me all about it, and then I had to, sit for a spell. But this is one of those reads, and I love anything to do with journalists and what's happening, and it's political, and it's scandalous. There's laundromats involved, and if you like, I love laundromats. They're the best place to people watch. But here it is. Kirkus Reviews calls Pretender, his novel, haunting in today's political environment, adding the author's own background in journalism adds texture to a fully developed, likable protagonist. A well-paced, enjoyable read, and it really goes with what's happening today. It's going to be available by the end of the week, early next week. Right now it is, what is today's date? March 12th? We're already there? March 12th, 2018. So watch out for it on Amazon. Steve has a page, his author page there. You can get Bella and Bootlicker there too. But again, Steve Piacente, and the novel is called Pretender. That's a good name. Steve,
I love it.
Welcome back to the show. How are you?
Hi, Lisa. Hi, Nancy. It's great to be back with you guys.
Well, listen, I'm just saying it's taken you a while to get this novel out. 2010 for Bella, 2012 for Bootlicker. We're glad, we're ready, and I'm so glad. It's. I know it's not easy to just, hey, excuse me, write what we all want you to do as fast as we want it to be. But this is like an amazing read in that the characters. I love that about your writing is that your characters, they hit home immediately at the very beginning. And, yeah, there's some naughty Nunu stuff in there that Dan did. But you're already identifying with them. You feel like you're there, but it happens very, very quickly. Is that because of your background of being a journalist?
Well, first, thank you very much for those kind words. The old cliche is write what you know. I spent 25 years in journalism. And so, I guess there's a lot of my history that I've brought into the books, for sure. Yeah.
And now Bella is part of this. So can you tell everybody, you want to give everyone a little overview of Bella?
Sure. Yeah, sure.
And then Bootlicker,
So the characters are the same throughout the 3 books, but I really want everyone to understand that you don't have to have read the other 2 to understand what's going on in Pretender. But just a quick capsule. In Bella, a journalist, a widow comes to a journalist and has this amazing story of how her husband, the military told her her husband was killed in battle overseas, and she comes to learn through the help of this journalist, Dan Petrano, that it was actually a friendly fire death. And he was actually killed by some men in his own unit. And they embark to prove this together. And what happens is that Dan, who is married, unhappily married, but married, has an affair with her. And, of course, in journalism, we talk about fake news today, but what Dan does in sleeping with his major source on a huge story is a far more egregious sin than anything that anybody's talking about.
Bigger than naughty Nunu, right? I mean, there's naughty Nunu, but then now you're being naughty. You're not. It's beyond naughty Nunu. Like you shouldn't be cheating on your wife, but now you're also now breaking a cardinal journalist rule, even though you're a badass journalist. Like now you did the deed.
Well, can I just say that the person's human?
Okay, I know, but that's exactly how you read about it. You're like, dude, I like you. I'd sit down and hang out, and I want to interview him.
Right.
Sorry.
So at the end of Bella, Dan kind of reconciles with his wife, but we're not quite sure what's going to happen. But he is certainly blackballed from the industry because this is not something you come back from. So that's where we kind of leave him. And then Bootlicker came afterwards, and Bootlicker is actually a prequel to Bella, and it explains how Dan winds up at the Southern newspaper and uncovers a secret behind this United States senator, a secret buried deep in his past. And so when we begin with Pretender, Dan is, of course, out of the industry and not quite sure what he's going to do. So he takes the only thing that he can get. So I found myself, as the writer here, wondering what would be a good thing for him to do while he's trying to work his way back from this terrible spot that he's in. And by the oddest of coincidences, I have a friend in New York who had worked in the retail garment industry and had that dried up for him. And so he was looking for something new. And long story short, he wound up buying into a chain of laundromats. So I thought, that would be interesting. And so I went up to New York, and I went and I visited some of these laundromats with him. And I wound up talking to the people who work there. This is funny research. And they told me these great stories. They spoke, mostly Spanish in the places that I was at, and I don't speak any Spanish at all, so it was kind of a communication issue, but they got it through, and they told me these great stories, some of which wound up in the book. But ultimately, I thought it would be cool for Dan to wind up running a laundromat because in his mind, this is a place where things come in dirty in the morning and go out clean at night.
Yeah.
And this is what he's trying to get to. And so that's how he wound up where he wound up.
And he thinks a lot. His whole thing is like, I don't want to think. I want a job where I don't have to do all this, but at the same time, he tortures himself.
It's not who he
right.
is,
He really does. He
right.
puts himself back in those positions of he puts himself back in it. But the laundromat, man, I love it because you're in D.C. and Congress, like half of Congress is going in there and doing their laundry. I mean, and he's a journalist, and now he's like, yeah, I'm here.
Right.
I think somebody should do a sitcom on laundromats because it's like going to McDonald's for coffee and the same people show up. And as we have traveled, being on the road, for 3 years, laundromats become part of your life. And there's the part when you get up, oh my gosh, you got to go do laundry, and like, oh no. And then the other part of you goes,
this is
okay,
cool.
It's going to be funny. Because it's funny.
It's like the coffee shop. It is but it's more gossipy. It is so perfect
because everybody's cleaning their stuff and they drop their bras on the floor by mistake, and some people put tennis shoes in the dryer, and you're like, dude, don't do that.
And there's other things that get dropped around apparently in your book.
Yeah, there's a whole.
That was one of the stories. Yes.
It's like it's another world in there.
Yeah. People leave things in their laundry sometimes that they don't intend to, and that's where we'll leave that discussion.
Yeah, I know. He doesn't want to get into that one.
But
yeah.
There's just things that
it's like the lady at the grocery store, and I bring all my cloth bags, and she's like, there's things falling out of it. And I'm like, look, it's an onion peel. It's just from the last time I was here getting onions and, vegetables. But she's like, you never know what's going to come out of someone's bags. And I'm like, I know.
Right.
She says, you wouldn't believe what will come out. And I'm like, really? I know. I get it. I just read Steve Piacente's book, Pretender. You never know what's going to come out in the wash. But I think it is very, very symbolic. I think it's really interesting also your story of being a journalist, too. Definitely a different reason of change of careers. You're also a life coach. And that, to me, this is all tied in. And don't you want to sit down with Dan? I mean, it kind of goes with, I know you run Next Phase life coaching, but doesn't that kind of go with this whole thing where everything you've built up, and he's at that age where he's not quite middle age, and he's right there going for the Pulitzer, and then all of a sudden it's like, dude, you messed up that one time, and it's not, or a few more times, but there's that. I mean, I thought about this because of our conversations over the years. This is interesting because he did it.
I mean, you raised a really good point, and here's what I've thought about. I've thought about that myself. So if Dan has the vision of what he wants to do, he, in his ideal world, he makes a successful return to the career that he undermined himself. Now, if I were life coaching Dan, what I would probably recommend would be much smaller steps toward his goal. So in other words, a little bit at a time. It reminds me of when people make New Year's resolutions. I'm going to lose 80 pounds by Valentine's Day. I'm going to go to the gym 6 days a week, 3 hours a day. And then, by the end of the month, it's over because it's too much. It's too ambitious.
Yeah.
It's not realistic. So what Dan does here, and it's really, it's of his choosing, but in a way it's not. He takes a tremendous gamble because he's skipping all the small steps. He's rolling the dice, and whatever, if he doesn't hit it, it's going to be over. He's got a lot of pressure at home, and if the story doesn't work out, and I don't think I'm giving anything away when I say that as he's settling in and trying to reconcile this new life he's living as the manager of the laundromat, one day a short note arrives from the senator that he helped put in jail 10 years earlier. And the note says, "No one knows the real story, hotshot. You ought to tell it before I kick off." And so now, if you can imagine
a
journalist of Dan's caliber getting a note like that, how it fires his imagination, and what's he going to do with this? He can't possibly just ignore it. So that's where the story kind of takes off.
And it's crazy, even when he sees that letter come in the mail, and it came not to his house. Here he is trying to, make things right with his wife, and yet still he thinks of Bella, So he's still got the hots for her, honestly. And then here comes this letter, and I love the way he's like, it takes him this time to do it, and it's almost like, how people will go out with a smoke break, and this is going to be my letter for a smoke break or something like that, a coffee break, or like whatever it's going to be. But like a smoke break that goes with a laundromat, like kind of thing to me right now. It does, And it's like he has this thing, but he put himself in the bathroom with that so no one would see. But he was shocked that letter that came in from ex-Senator McCauley actually came to the laundromat too. But I'm going like Congress is going there and washing their stuff out. I mean, they need to. But anyhow.
Right. There's symbolism all over the place, for sure.
Yeah. I know. But, he's so interesting because he's a very thoughtful person. Like and I think that's, again, being a journalist, that every little thing is something. It's a clue.
Yeah. And so that gets kind of like to some of the bigger themes that I wanted to address. Does he deserve a second chance? Does an act have to be illegal to be a crime? And who decides if the offender is worthy of forgiveness? So those are some of the bigger questions I was interested in with this one.
Well, go ahead, Nancy.
No, I was going to say that.
Just don't tell everybody.
No, I'm just going to go real general here. In my experience, I feel like when things like what you're talking about happen, that people beat themselves up more than anybody else can beat them up. And once you start beating yourself up, somehow the choir joins in. So, and so I think that's part of why when people make a big change in life, they do the beat up stuff, and then other people say, no, it's not that bad. Others like, yeah, you suck. And then instead of taking things in small steps, you feel like you have to launch a rocket and do the impossible.
Oh, yeah. Been there.
Yeah, that's interesting. We can't forget, though, that a lot of Dan's problems were brought on by Dan himself. And so the situation that he finds himself in was of his own creation, right?
Right.
So that doesn't necessarily mean he doesn't deserve to try to get back to where he was.
Yeah.
But, he's definitely a flawed character, for sure.
But aren't we all? I mean, we all make mistakes.
Well, his is a good doozy.
Well, no, it is a doozy, but and I'm not glossing over it. I'm just saying that I don't know anybody who hasn't made a doozy of a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, you guys are both putting your finger on something that was a challenge for me, which is, recognizing that he created his own problems. He still, as a character, has to be likable enough that you're rooting for him at some level.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that was, I mean, he's got redeeming qualities for sure. And hopefully, the relationship with his wife and his son help bring that out a little bit.
So he's very human. Let's put it that way. He's very human, so he's likable because you can identify. Now, I want to talk about descriptive words because you're really good at forming a character.
It's amazing, yeah.
Yeah. So there are certain words like he had a weak chin. Now you don't like the person because he had a weak chin. But a person with a weak chin can also be very brave. Or he had a chiseled chin. Now he's a big macho dude. When you're writing, how do you choose the words?
Yeah, that's cool. Weak chin is good. That's good.
There's weak and then there's the chiseled
chin.
Yeah.
Or the furrowed brow.
Yeah, you're giving us pictures.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think, it's editing and re-editing and kind of being ruthless in the interest of serving the reader. And I have said this before, but I really believe it, that I'd rather operate with a scalpel than a sledgehammer. And so, there's a saying in writing, show, don't tell. And so what I'm hopeful of is that the characters are fleshed out through what they say and do more than by adjectives.
Interesting.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we were talking to another author the other day where we were talking about, okay, we want the novel to move on. We don't need to be told the ocean is shimmering and doing this and doing that. We just know it's the ocean. Give us some credit. Let's move on it.
We want to co-create
in our own mind.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
That's really funny.
Well, yeah, because it's a relationship. You have a relationship because once you, as a reader, start to read a book and you like it from the first. I mean, you got the first sentence. You're in, and you're like, okay, and it's not failing you. You get in, and then you're like up at 2 a.m, going, Steve, you've been on our show for a few times, and I'm like, dude, I need to go to bed, and then it's like just one more, and then you look like how I'm hanging in there, and then all of a sudden it's like you're supposed to go to work, you're still there. So that to me is like really good stuff when you're in it, and it doesn't matter how tired you are, you're in it, because it's moving fast enough. But you allow us to have our own visuals, yet you're putting visuals there. I don't even know how to explain it, but you are allowing it to be part of it's a relationship with the book. You develop a relationship. People want to watch reality TV shows. I say read a book, they're better.
But at the same time, we're defending a guy that doesn't really exist.
But
we're defending somebody we've never met.
But you have all these emotions for someone because he knows how to write a character.
Well, Chekhov, the writer Chekhov, said it best. And the quote is, "Don't tell me the moon is shining. Show me the glint of light on broken glass."
Ooh, I love
and
that.
That really says it to me.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I know that you also, you have a master's in fiction, creative fiction, also from Johns Hopkins University. So you went into that. Like, what was that like? And what made you do that and journalism? Like you're going, I'm going to go in creative fiction and be a journalist. Like I'm doing the two opposites. Like, dude, cool.
My answer to this actually dates me, but I'm going to tell you anyway. So when I was getting toward the end of my newspaper career, I didn't know it was the end, but it was heading that way. we were still at a time when online newspapers were just coming on. So I would write stories from the Washington Bureau for the newspaper in Charleston, South Carolina. Again, I'm from New York, so there's a little bit of a culture shock there. But I would get instructions from editors to give me 12 inches on this story or 14 inches for that story. And I was finding that very frustrating. I was finding that some of the most compelling pieces of my story could never get in to the newspaper because there wasn't enough room. So that prompted me. Now it's not an issue, right? Because the internet is forever.
Exactly.
But that prompted me to start thinking about maybe it's not that, maybe it's the kind of writing that I'm doing. And so I thought I've always been interested more in the storytelling part of it than the reporting part of it, the writing piece more than going out and interviewing people. So why don't I try this fiction program? And I applied to the Hopkins program, and I got in. I started writing, and that is actually where all of this began for me. The thing that struck me and really was the catalyst for a lot of this was that I was covering in my newspaper job a senator named Strom Thurmond. Strom Thurmond was one of those guys who from the Deep South actually ran for president in 1948, I think it was. I can't remember exactly. But anyway, he was one of those guys who said, there aren't enough soldiers in the Army or bayonets or rifles to force us to allow the Negroes into our public schools and our swimming pools and so on and so forth. And I thought, here it is, the 1990s, and I'm covering this guy. And, back then I could understand how that played politically. But in the time that I was covering him, the state was a third African American. And I was like, how does this guy get elected in the modern era? How does he keep getting reelected?
Well, that's a good question.
That's timely.
So over the 10 years that I had the job, ladies, I found myself asking. I wasn't obsessed with this, but I was kind of obsessed. I would ask political science professors. I would ask voters. I would ask campaign officials. I would ask anyone who would listen to me and try to come up with a reasonable answer to that question. Honestly, no one could. And so I made one up myself, and I wrote a book.
It is really interesting how things happen today because we have so much more coverage, so much more in depth and constant coverage to the point of overwhelm in a lot of areas. And as Lisa and I talk to different people, like what we do all the time, it's really interesting when people share their opinions, and then we're always surprised, and we're always like, really? It's really, really interesting how not exactly divided people are, but from the question is, why do you think that? Where did you get that? Why?
That's where the books come in. To me, that's a role to get people to think. Sometimes you're reading the news, watching the news, it's these bullet points, headlines, you're getting into it. But I think that there's, number one, I have to say, any kind of book that reads like yours, it's moving fast, and you're in it. And you can slow it down if you want. It's up to you as a reader. But there's something about journalists writing fiction that kicks butt. I mean, it really does, because you're getting the nitty-gritty, but it's still got the characters. There's a way that the journalists know how to read people. And I think what Nancy's saying is really true, because when you get at the end of the day, we need books to make us think, because the news is now becoming get the headline. There's so much news right now. It used to be like the weather was the weather is big news. But, there was little things that became big news because there wasn't news, or maybe, I don't know what was going on. But right now we have an abundance of news, and we're not thinking as much. I think it's hard to think because we're in overwhelm, and a place of solace is fiction. and you get us to think about all these things.
You can delve into ideas.
You can bridge the gap between people and places.
I'm just always astonished at people that we've known for years. We can talk to them for 10, 15 minutes and ask them a question, and our challenge is don't let your eyebrows raise up when they answer, because you think you know them, and then they answer, and you're like, whoa. It is.
It's funny
really,
because it's funny because you can hear when somebody's eyebrows go up like that.
Yeah, I know.
You don't have to see it.
Because we're thinking about televising our radio shows, and our big thing is what are we going to do with our eyebrows?
No, it's about Nancy and her eyes rolling.
That's the other one, the eye roll,
and
the eyebrow.
But Steve, this is something really interesting to me about combining these two amazing forms of communication, fiction and journalism, and I think that's this magic thing that you have with it is it moves fast and gets people to think, and you don't think you're thinking. That's the beauty of it.
No, you're thrust into the story.
Let me go back to something that you said, because we there's one more piece that we have to consider, and that is that what's happened now in mass media is that too often people are gravitating toward the station or the news outlet that they believe corresponds with their way of thinking, and that media outlet is playing right into it by serving up news in a way that caters to the audience. And that, to me, is one of the most dangerous things that there is, because you never get a different perspective.
Right.
And
so true.
And that's where I think, I also teach up at American University, and I teach beginning journalism writing. It's one of the things that I really, really stress is that when you turn in your stories this semester, no matter what it is, I don't want to know how you think about it. I don't want to know your feelings about the story. And I give them very compelling, emotional, kind of driven stories. And it's hard for them to keep their opinions and their thoughts and their personal feelings out of it. But that's really what I think is important for the next generation of journalists.
I think, and it's difficult because now we're also in independent media, which we are, and so we're allowed to be opinionated, and and we're good at it, as you know. But that's it's different. It's so important. I think this last 4 years has really proven it, and I mean 4 years, 4 to 5 years, has proven the function of news media, and people are questioning things and all of that. I mean, it's so important to have credible media out there where they're just telling the story. This is it. And if you ask them opinion, now what happens with that? Because anchors and journalists go on to other shows now. It's like journalists have had to, and the Washington Post, that started with that, where journalists are now going out to become more endearing to the public and to their readers, so that they know who they are. So you know whether or not to believe what they wrote. I mean, this is a weird thing to me.
So yes, and so when Dan starts out to investigate this mysterious note that Macaulay is, he is committed to doing a fair, honest, balanced job on this piece. And that, I think, is one of the redeeming qualities that he has.
Absolutely. And also talk about what you're saying, like, you teach, young journalists getting in there and getting into that career. You've also got a young journalist. Here he is in a laundromat, and this, young lady's already sussed him out. She knows who Dan is and comes up to him and starts like, okay, I want to interview you. And he's like, okay, I'm going to give you the story. Like, that's crazy. I was sitting there going, what? He's out there just letting it happen.
Yeah. So that's it was a convenient vehicle to get, some of that story and lessons learned explained to readers who maybe haven't read the other books yet.
Okay.
Another point I wanted to make was I mentioned earlier that I'm from New York originally, but I spent 25 years in Southern journalism. the great writer John Updike said that writers should put themselves in positions that they normally wouldn't be in so that they gain new and different perspective. Now, I had no idea when I got my first job down in Florida right out of college that the next couple of decades would pave the way to what are now 3 novels. But without those northern sensibilities in that southern atmosphere, none of this would have ever struck me as unusual or different, and so I probably wouldn't have even noticed. So it's something that I look back on, and you're doing things in moments and you have no idea what the repercussions will be later on. So it's just kind of an interesting thing to me.
But it goes with what you're saying about don't stick to one media either, because you never know.
Yeah.
But I think this is why Lisa and I are so into travel and putting ourselves into different situations, because that's the only way you can break out of that is to go somewhere new where everything is different for you, so that you can force yourself to look at something in a new way. It's far more difficult to do that than people realize.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I'll tell you a funny story. I went to American University myself as a student, and I was there, again dating myself, but I was there during Watergate. And if you were in Washington in college and interested in writing during Watergate, you basically had no choice. You were going to become a reporter. It's just the way it worked out. So I thought I was going to be covering the White House and Congress when I graduated, and unfortunately, no one would hire me to do anything like that. So I wound up getting the only job in journalism that I could get, which was a high school sports writer at the Naples Daily News down in Naples, Florida, tiny Naples, Florida. And I started covering, this is really funny, I started covering the Naples High School Golden Eagle football team the way Woodward and Bernstein covered the Nixon administration. And one day I get a call from the coach's secretary. They were called secretaries back then. And she said, the coach would like to talk to you. And I thought, I'm going to get a scoop. I'm going to get some insight on the next week's game. He's going to tell me about the secret play, whatever. And I arrive, and I walk in the office. And the coach's name, by the way, and you can't make this up, his name was Dick Pugh. So Coach Pugh called me in, and I walk in expecting to get this tremendous insight, and instead I see on his desk 3 of my stories with the offensive parts highlighted in yellow. And I'm like, because his point of view was that the local reporter had to be a cheerleader for the local team. And I was like, that's not what they taught me at American University where Watergate was going on. And we had, I'll sum it up this way. We had a tense relationship for the 2 years that I was there.
But because you're.
That's politics right there.
But that's how it is.
Everything is politics. Yes.
Even with us, traveling the country and going in places, and it's like, well, we can't write about this place. You don't want us to. It's not going to be good for anybody, and you have to hold your guns. You have to, because there's places people should not stay. Like you will slide on a grease slick into your room, kind of places. Blood on the mattress, kind of places. And everybody thinks it's fine because when was their last inspection of their own local, tourist outlets? And so it's really interesting. And in our industry, there's this. It's integrity. At the end of the day, where's your integrity lie? Do you become a sellout, or are you going to be? And that's what I love about Dan, your protagonist, which I still don't like the word protagonist. I just feel like it's like it sounds like a criminal right there. But I don't like that word. I never have. I've always had a hard time even pronouncing it and saying it. Until the other day, I was finally okay, protagonist. But I just don't like it. But anyway, I just want to. It's the main character, okay? Dan. What's so interesting about him is like he's got integrity to his work, even though he was a naughty nunu. He was still there was integrity.
We have this conversation all the time.
It was still on I know it's your source that you're being naughty with, but and it's bad. It's bad for his wife. It's bad for his family. It's bad. Okay, it's like Bill Clinton bad. Okay, but or maybe now that's changed too. It gotten worse. But the reality is, you're not supposed to do that with your source for many reasons, but he still did good stuff in what he was doing. He was still I'm fighting for him, dude.
No, but Lisa and I have this conversation all the time. I think you're the perfect person to interject here. We have this.
Good luck.
Yeah, isn't this fun? No, we have this conversation about a person living in your neighborhood that you say hi to if you're walking down the street, and he's nice to his dog, can still be a serial killer. You just don't know it because you like them because they like their dog and we like dogs. That's kind of how the human thinks, in a way. And so it's the character. Go ahead. Save
here's
me.
what I'll say. I'm gonna bring in my life coaching experience here.
Good.
Because what I've learned in creating and now working for more than a year with mixed phase life coaching is that, let me put it like this. I now believe that if you walk down the street in your neighborhood and you peeked in people's windows, everybody's house. I'm not suggesting you do this, by the way.
No.
I'm just saying if you did.
You could get shot.
If you did, what you would find is that everybody is dealing with something.
Yeah.
Everybody's got problems and everybody's got issues. Everybody's got family drama. I'm not going to go anywhere near the serial killer thing, but it's a classic don't judge the book by its cover. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about.
It's like if a person has a nice garden, they must be nice. If they like their own dog, they must be nice. If they're a good musician, they must be nice.
If you watch Fox News, you are a Republican. If you watch CNN, you're a Democrat.
It's the generality, maybe, like we pull everything in, maybe because we don't have time to really think. Just like, if you do this, you must be that. And it so isn't true.
It's not true, and I think we all need to be on guard against it. And I think what happens is that everybody's so busy and bombarded by all the hassles of the day that we kind of take the easy way out. And what I mean is that we are too quick to label people, to buy into stereotypes, and to, frankly, not exercise independent thinking. I think that's kind of what you're talking about.
And I think this is where I love that you're bringing journalism into your stories because, number one, I think that we need to understand journalists. We need to have that relationship again beyond the talking heads of TV. You know, and then you look at, here comes it's just like this charade that keeps going on. And do they even know? I remember watching a Daily Show episode with Trevor Noah talking to someone. Oh, she was a lady, and I really wish I could remember her name, but she goes on all these different pundits. And he's like, do they just tell you what to say, or do you just say what you want to say? Like, it got to this point, and I was like, dude, that's like,
that's a great question.
I thought that was one of the best questions, because you see all these people come on, and are you paid to say this? Are you, how honest is all of this? If it's a journalist coming on, someone who's really a correspondent, I'm going to listen to you from all sides. But I want to hear a correspondent. I want to hear someone who's really on the ground, because at the end of the day, I know journalists, is this not true? You're on the ground running. Your ankles are hurting, man. You're like, you are physically at it. It's not sitting behind your computer looking at Wikipedia, what other stories are saying. You're getting the story, you're doing it. It's physical. It's tangible. it's not.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you're bringing, ideally you're bringing readers into places that they wouldn't go. You're you're clearing away all the BS and giving them the facts and, kind of being the filter. I just think, like in any profession, there are good journalists and not, and there are good politicians and not, and any field you can name, there are good laundromat managers and not.
And not.
So, right.
I love the laundromat.
I know it's like a Seinfeld episode.
I know, it's totally true.
It's totally
true. I love the laundromat.
There's the low washers and the high washers.
I know, it's so cool.
There you go.
Oh man, I wish I was there doing that.
I want to ask another thing because of your writing ability to portray a character that we absolutely know the character, right? When you dress a character, should they have brown eyes, blue eyes?
Yeah, how do you dress them?
Yeah. So do you think about that, or you just write it and it comes out that way? Like, is there a psychology behind the color of eyes they have or how they dress?
Do you have a sketch pad and a writing pad?
Yeah.
I probably have an imaginary sketch pad, but remember that these characters now cross over 3 books. And I'd be lying to you if I told you I remembered the color of Dan's wife's eyes from book 1 to when I was writing book 3. So it's really important for your own credibility that all of those details match up.
Yeah.
So yes, that's part of the answer. The other part of the answer is that I haven't. What I do is I interview my characters before I put them in the book. Or while I'm in the book, maybe I'm in a place where I need some more fleshing out, I will actually draw up a list of questions and try to answer in the character's voice. And
I love
when
that.
When I do that,
I want to watch.
I come out sometimes and my eyes are glazed and my wife thinks I'm crazy or something.
I bet.
But if you can let your authorial control go for a minute and just let the characters speak as if they were actually human beings, they will take you into interesting places and they will surprise you. And it's a really interesting exercise. And this is something obviously I get from my reporting background. But I'll come up with a list of 5 to 10 challenging questions. If Dan does this, how would you respond? And if Macaulay goes here, how would you handle that? And just let them talk. And one thing we haven't really addressed yet is dialogue. And dialogue in fiction is what quotes are in journalism.
Yeah.
So when you select the quotes as a reporter that you're going to use in a story, it's obviously a subjective decision. You go in and you probably interview somebody for 10 minutes and come up with 4 or 5 pages of quotes. Which ones do you use? Which ones do you leave out? All of that is very subjective, but the goal is to accurately represent the person that you interviewed. What I tell my students is, when you're selecting which quotes to use, it's either unique information or it's said uniquely. So I try to give each character a distinct voice, and when they speak, I'm very conscious of whether, Ellie would say it this way or Macaulay would say it that way, so that it rings true. Because once you break that dream with that you've kind of put the reader into, it's almost impossible to get back.
So let me ask you this. Can Dan ever wear Bermuda shorts?
Oh, he would have to be really drunk.
I know. That's exactly what I just thought. My mind is he's going to have to be, something has had to, like a big shift has had to have happened, and like, yeah, no.
Isn't that weird though?
That's wild.
Because anybody should be able to wear Bermuda shorts, but it just doesn't work.
It correlates to some of the things we talk about, and just on our other side of tourism is about towns having a sense of place and the importance of that. So when you travel, I know you do a lot of travel, and when you go to a place because you want to feel what that place is. And it's the same thing in a book. That's why I think Nancy and I have just like your characters are the big thing for us in reading that, and they become, this is part of your family for the few days you're reading the book, and it is a few days because you're going to read it fast, But but that they become part of it. It's like when you're reading a really good book, and I hate to say really good book, but that's how we all talk. It's like, man, this is a really good book, and when it's a really good book, it's it. You have a hard time going to bed, and then the next morning it's still there. It's like watching a good movie, reading a good book. It's living with you. It's living with you, like while you're doing other things. Sorry, some radio guests, while I'm talking to you, I'm thinking about them. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm kidding. But you know what I mean. It's really it becomes, you start to think about the characters and what would they do, and I think it being with him being a journalist, and then the political side of things, and then the laundromat I love, because there's just something for everybody to find a place that they are comfortable in, and then go into another part that you're not comfortable in. So I think we stretch as individuals reading. Is that part of what you do when you write, is think about who's reading? Do you ever think about that part, or you're just telling the story?
Well, I guess the thing that flashed in my mind when you asked that was one of my first. So I did the job in Naples, and then I moved to a town called Lakeland, Florida, where I did news for a little bit, and then I got hired by the Tampa Tribune. And when I got over to the Tampa Tribune, one of the first things they did was they sent me out to cover a city council meeting where they were discussing some technical matter, and I had to come back. It was going to be an increase in some kind of rates for the citizens of Tampa. And when I got back to the newsroom, I wrote it up in what I thought was the right way, which was in the language that they spoke it at the city council meeting. And try to imagine a busy newsroom with probably 15 reporters and editors between where I was sitting and my main editor, who was this crusty old guy who had no tolerance for anything that smacked of jargon. And so he, without any concern about who was listening, yelled out, "Hey, Piacente, do you want anyone to actually read this thing?" So you can imagine how I felt. And I walked over and I said, "Yes, sir, I do." He goes, "Well, then you can't write it like this." And he proceeded to give me a very important lesson in plain English, using plain English, that never left me. And the reason I tell you this is that the audience is never far from my mind. So I want the story to move. I want it to be compelling. No honest author will tell you he or she wants to write anything that no one is going to read.
Well, yeah, what a waste of time.
Right, exactly. So that's a long answer to the question, but that's how I feel. I mean, I'm thinking about the audience. I'm not trying to write something. Like there are some who, when vampire, mysteries were really the big thing. I can write, so I'm going to write a vampire mystery. No, I would never do anything like that. I do believe you have to have a foundation in what you're writing about to make it credible.
I know authors that went off and did porn stuff, just bodice rippers or whatever you want to call them, because under a different name. And I was like, okay, why don't you just practice what you're doing? Like, you don't need to do that, but apparently they did.
But
I don't know.
Sometimes you're put in a position as a painter. I took abstract art. I I don't do well with that. In the class, I couldn't paint an abstract. I failed it, and I failed it, and I failed it because I'm a realist kind of painter. And I finally passed the class by going to the LA Zoo and buying a 50-cent print that a chimpanzee did with 3 colors and turning it in. And the professor said, "Oh, Nancy's had a major breakthrough." And I'm like, "You're an ass." But anyway, I passed.
That's a great
story.
No,
but I passed. The chimpanzee passed. I didn't because I couldn't go there.
Yeah.
And no matter what, finger painting or whatever, he just was like, "No, you just don't get it." I'm like, "You're right. That's not me." But it was part of the curriculum that I had to pass to go forward. So that's what I did. And quite frankly, good for the chimp.
But I think this is what's so interesting about this whole conversation today is that no matter what you do in life, at some point it comes back to you in something. Number one, that was like, hey, I'm just going to get that done in some way, and I'm just going to prove this point, And I mean, you didn't know that was going to win, but at the end of the day, like what you were talking about,
it was primitive.
When you went into, John Hopkins and you're doing creative fiction and fiction, that you, next thing you know, that's you're writing novels now, and you didn't know about your journalism, career at that point, how this shift was going to happen. And I know that you're also, a coach and a communications manager. I mean, you've done so much speech writing, which has got to be like fascinating, because that's where do you like write a speech with someone's voice? Do you do that? Like when you see?
so a couple of things. When I didn't choose to leave journalism. The industry took a big hit right after 9/11. And my newspaper called up one day and said, "Hey, we can't afford to have a Washington bureau anymore. You can move back down here if you'd like to live in Charleston, and we'll give you a job down here." And I didn't want to do that. So I started poking around and trying to figure out what I could do next. And what I wound up doing was I became a speechwriter in the government. And I was hired, even though I never had any speechwriting experience, because the person that that hired me realized that when I was going out, that in essence, my journalism background qualified me for this job. And the reason that it did was because, again, when you go out and you interview somebody and you quote and you take those quotes down, and you pick which quotes you're going to use in the story, you're basically, another way to look at that is you're basically capturing the quotes that explain the person's voice. Mm-hmm. They really capture that person's voice. And that, what else is speech writing but that? It's
you
sitting
can hear
down.
Someone say that, Yes. That sentiment.
It's a sentiment, it's the rhythm, it's the nuance, it's the inflection, it's all of those things.
Yeah.
And the phrasing. So, that's all part and parcel of it. Now, when we jump ahead to life coaching, I do some life coaching with writers. And I'll tell you, one of the first things I ask them is why do you write? Mm-hmm. Why do you write? And that yields interesting responses sometimes. Some people are very candid and they want to become famous and they want to make the bestseller list. Others are more about, I didn't choose to do this; it chose me. And so it's a very different mindset. I ask, when did you discover you love to write? Where would you like your writing to take you? What are 3 things about writing you're certain are true? What confuses you about writing? When we start getting into those types of questions, we really, get into a writer's head. And, sometimes the writer hasn't even thought of those things. And so, maybe it has to do with honoring the values that you think are most important or that are most important to you, your core values. How does writing honor your core values? And so we get into those interesting discussions. So,
it's
it's just another way of looking at all this.
Yeah, because I think it's really it's so interesting, your life, from what we've talked about with writing, journalism, speech writing. It's all very odd. Like you're a listener. You're very audio centric, yet also writing, and so there's that tactile part of it. And it's really interesting to me because to be a good journalist, you have to observe and listen and get the nuggets. It's the same thing it's the same thing in creative writing, fiction. Same thing, life coaching. If you don't really hear what your client's saying, I know some really, like you said, there's good and bad in all industries. There's some that like, here's the formula, that's it, off you go, bye. You're not hearing, and people just. And the other part is hearing, portraying, showing. There is of the writing side. But the same thing in what you talked about in journalism is the same thing that I look at with coaching, what you're doing with a life coach. Isn't that the same thing where as a journalist, it's about getting the truth and sharing that with your audience? But isn't that the same thing as a life coach is getting the truth and not shedding your opinion so much as like, hey, I've never liked, chefs. I don't care about that, so I don't think you should be one. If that's been your burning desire deep down, you know what I mean? I'm just saying, what I mean? There's an opinion thing that you have to kind of put yourself out of, like you have to be a really observant observer and truth teller. It's kind of neat, man.
Yes. And I like that description, and I think it does fit. The one thing about life coaching that I just want to make clear is that we're not dispensing advice. We're helping unblock people. So we do that. Again, the journalism background helps because at the heart of this is empowering questions and finding the right questions to ask so that the person in the life coaching scenario reaches the conclusion or the solution that was in there all the time, but it was just clogged up, blocked up, and they couldn't quite see it because no one was asking them the right question. And, for Dan, bringing it full circle back to the book, Dan does know the questions to ask. And again, the difference with him is that he's rolling the dice and taking a big gamble with this. And if it works out, great. And if it doesn't, it's not going to be so good for him. But, there's a third possibility, which is that he rolls the dice and comes up with something that he didn't anticipate.
Well, that would be called life.
Well, there's a clarity thing because we are all so busy and inundated, and then we welcome the Internet, which has confused issues beyond belief, but is a great tool. And there's a learning curve to how to use the Internet and how to actually understand the results as opposed to just reading headlines and having an opinion and half reading things and like Google is now an adjective, a verb, a noun, and everything. There's a thing there where I think we're trying to process so much put on our doorstep. And how do you get away from that? How do you like have a different point of view when you're fed? Here's this point of view.
I know how. Read a good book.
That's right. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. This is the whole point to me, is that when you have books that allow you to co-create. I love that. I love that so much that you can be part of it. You can have your own visuals. You're allowed to see the laundromat in the way you want to. You've set it up. Here's the basic. Here's the foundation of the laundromat. This is the parking situation. You can envision that. And I know about that, and that's why I'm scared of driving in D.C. There's someone else called Uber. I don't know. It's going to have to help me when we get there. But that's the thing. Like you see, but then you create. You have to be able to co-create because then your brain is thinking, your soul is in it, and that's the most beautiful thing. is when an author, a writer, a movie, I mean, anything like that, that's what the world of the arts does, is allows us to go somewhere, and it's this like little safe magic carpet ride that you can go on, and it's yours. You can be watching a movie with two people sitting together, and everybody's that both are having a different experience. Same thing with a book. And everybody likes to read their books their way, whether it's outside under a tree or inside with a cup of tea. Everybody does their thing. Me, I like it with a good glass of wine. But then, like for you, like Steve, I'm up for the rest of the night, so I can't keep drinking wine. But anyway, you don't need it. So, but this is such a good book, and I love how all these ties are there in your life, and how this is all played out. I mean, it's a good story, just your story of journalism and life coaching, how everything ties together, because to me it's a story of life. It's cool, man. Very cool.
Thank you.
And everyone,
thank you so much.
Pretender comes out. Watch for it on Amazon the end of this week. Again, it's March 12th right now, but watch for it at the end of this week. Beginning of next week, Steve Piacente has a author page on Amazon, so you'll see Bella and Bootlick are there. He's also part of our Big Blend expert team, so if you go to blendradioandtv.com, you'll see him there in our expert department. You can hear his past interviews. He also talks about being a life coach, but also for that, go to stevepiacente.com, and you can talk with him for free and have like an initial consult, so you can all talk to each other without, so you understand that, because that's a personal thing to make that decision in life. Before you go, when does someone call you? When is it because I think sometimes it takes cojones to call.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I'm very friendly and very accessible and very relatable, so nobody should feel worried about calling. But, I would say I'll describe my typical client, and that might be the best way to answer this. Mm-hmm. My typical client is highly functioning, doing pretty well, probably making a pretty good salary, and on the surface, everything looks fine. Outsiders would say that person looks really happy, everything is going his or her way. But inside, they're not happy. They're not feeling fulfilled. They're not feeling challenged. It could be a number of things. And my job as the life coach is to help you figure out why and what we can do to get you where you want to be.
I love that. And I think that as we live longer, that we go through these stages in our 30s, 40s, maybe 50s. They used to say, the midlife crisis, and we're buying Ferraris if you have that kind of money. But you know what I mean? But I think it's happening 2 to 3 times through people's lives just because we're living longer and life is changing. Technology is changing. So I think there's things that just are going to happen.
And there's no such thing as particularly for people who are retiring in their 50s and early 60s, there's a whole nother lifetime ahead of you. Mm-hmm. And if you haven't planned that out, those can be awfully long, boring years. So let's talk about it.
That's awesome. I love that. Steve, before you go, you've got another book in the works, right? I got to say that.
Cool.
I
do. Very quickly, yes. It's a nonfiction book aligned with my coaching practice. I have interviewed 15 people, gotten their to hell and back stories, found out what they learned about themselves, and we're going to pass on lessons for other people.
Cool.
Everyone, again, stevepiacente.com. Now, I used to say Steve Piacente, but then I heard Steve on one of our shows tell us how to pronounce his name. Piacente. Okay, I'm getting there, Steve. I'm just telling you. Everybody, he's also on social media, and I encourage you to go to his Instagram account and go follow him there. What is that? Is it the same as Twitter? Because Twitter, you're Words Prof, like Words Professor, Words Prof. What's Instagram?
Instagram
know you there.
It's just my name without a space between the first and last name. It's just Steve Piacente.
Steve Piacente. Yeah, everyone go follow him there and follow him on Twitter. Always great advice, life advice, book advice, writers. I mean, you've got it all covered there, and it's just fun and insightful reading. So keep up with him there. But stevepiacente.com, and of course, go get the book Pretender. And don't tell me the ending, but it'll be out now. So, Steve, we've got a song for you, a special song. I actually have a lot, but after our conversation, this one is called Better Man This Year. Better Man This Year.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us. Here it is, Better Man This Year, everybody. It's from the Tall Men Group, and it's off of their very first album. It's called 12 by 6 because it is 6 tall men, and they each have 2 songs. They're about to get out their 4th album, Stripped Down. 6 tall men stripped down. Well, I'm just saying. They'll be on our show real soon, so watch for that for the end of March or early April. But here it is, Better Man This Year, and I dedicate this to Dan. Your protagonist, if I have to say that name, character, your main character. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Have a great night.
You too.
You too.
My world went white, but not with a lie. It was fear that my time here had reached its end. Well, my list is long of things that I've done wrong. I could have been a better husband, son, and friend. And if this house of cards should fall, if I cannot hold a pen, and if I cannot speak at all, or if I never sing again, I hope that I've been kind enough. I'm so happy to be here that I might be a better man this year. Well, I've had the blues and I've read the news. Seems like everybody's living troubled times. Still, with all my stuff, I still think I'm not enough. And I believe that I've been searching for a sign. But if this curtain does come down, and if I cannot walk the beach, if I can't raise my arms at all, the whole world just outside my reach, and I hope that I have loved enough. I'm so happy to be here that I might be a better man this year, a better man this year. So I raise my voice in song, hoping to erase all that's been wrong, and try to take back every harsh word that was mine, and all the good things I've done, I'll try to repeat them, everyone, and lift the ones who need me at this time. But if these sands have all run out, if I can't hold your hand in mine, if I can't raise my voice to shout, if I've just plain run out of time, then I hope that I've been good enough. I'm so happy to be here. Maybe I will see that there's still some hope for me, that I might try to be a better man this year.